Whether Australia should remove prohibitions on nuclear installations to allow it to become part of our energy mix is under review by a Senate committee. Young advocates are saying, at least some, that nuclear is a good idea because it's safer than traditional fossil fuels and modern technology will only enhance that. The inquiry has heard the reputation of nuclear energy has been coloured by unrealistic media depictions.
We're at a real turning point here in Australia where I would really encourage that we have an open mind to nuclear energy, that we have a fact-based debate, and we give a platform to experts like those behind me who really know their stuff.
The Minerals Council of Australia also gave evidence this morning. Chief Executive Tanya Constable joins me now. So, look, it's a Senate committee, see where it goes, but what are you actually calling for in this debate?
It's important, Tom, that we get the prohibition on nuclear energy removed from the Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act. That's a good start to continue the debate around nuclear energy in Australia. So that's what we're calling for. We're not calling for nuclear power right now. We just want to continue the discussion.
You've been around this building, you know the politics. Is any government actually going to do something like that unless there's a reason to do it, i.e. there's a power plant they want to get in place right now and that's why it needs to be lifted?
No one is going to invest in nuclear energy unless the right signals are in place to start with. So the prohibition needs to be lifted for that interest to come forward.
Okay, so not even necessarily investment, but the interest or doing the numbers on it or figuring out where you'd put it, all that sort of stuff. None of that will come until it's been lifted. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. There's work being done in the margins, but serious work needs to occur. For that to occur, we need to see that prohibition lifted in Australia, and we do need to have that occur. Anywhere in the world that is going to meet their targets has a diverse energy mix, and Australia, with an abundance of all of the natural resources we have, including uranium, we have a third of the reserves of uranium here in Australia. So we're really ideally placed for nuclear energy. The
issue, of course, is a couple of things. If you build a big one, it takes a lot of time and it's still not a particularly cheap form of energy. It's technical, you've got to have a lot of safety standards around it. Is it fair to say right now it might not make sense, but it's just could be part of the mix, and maybe the small modular reactors, they're trying to prove their sort of case commercially, but it's just an option for now rather than something would actually happen for sure?
Well, the debate's moved on from the bespoke large plants to small modular reactors, around about 300 megawatts with advanced technology that can be sited where you might see traditional forms of energy and also out in remote areas. Mining, for instance, would benefit from having small modular reactors because of the different types of advanced technology. So that's where we see a real response happening at a global level, and companies like GE, NewScale, Terracom, those sorts of companies are already starting to look at investment in the United States.
So starting to look's the key one, isn't it? That we don't have one of these operational and commercially viable right now. A lot of theoretical, some are working at some sort of level, but they're still very expensive. So it needs to improve, doesn't it, as a tech to be part of the mix? You're wanting it to get the opportunity to improve.
I wouldn't say it's expensive because Lazard, which is a really reputable financial organisation, has just completed a study in the United States, different parts of the United States, doing a comparison of energy costs, the production of energy, but also the whole of system cost, including transmission and distribution. And nuclear energy is right in the mix, sitting alongside solar and wind, and in comparison to that. We want to see more of that.
Okay, so just unpacking that. So as an isolated form, at the moment, the nature of a small modular, smaller scale, it's not really viable. But if you factor in how much you might need to rebuild the grid with renewables, if the other option is putting nuclear where some of the coal-fired power plants are, that's where you get a sort of comparison in terms of cost. Is that the claim?
We wouldn't argue that it is not viable. In fact, it is viable at a global level. In the 2028, we'll see GE bring a small modular reactor into the United States. There are already SMRs appearing on order books as we speak. So at a global level, That's occurring, and in Australia we now need to open up the discussion. We've had submarines pass, and we're going to see support for submarines. That is an industry that will build new.
But when we see stuff like this, we have the initial price tag and then the real one. My point is they're not out there right now operating in a market, having proved themselves commercially viable. There might be some estimates, but that's to come. That bit still needs to happen. And you'd sense Australia will sit and wait for that to be the case and then possibly build them.
All new technologies are expensive. First-of-kind technologies are always more expensive than what is being suggested. But we see examples of that everywhere, and then costs come down. We saw it with renewables.
Well, that's the hope. But what I said is right. There's not a small modular reactor right now in a market proving cost efficient as is. There might be some forecasts, but it hasn't happened yet.
I wouldn't say forecasts. When you're actually doing line-by-line estimates and you've got something on your order books, so a company willing to take that next step, then that means that we're going to see first of kind on the ground by 2028.
All right.
And there's real potential.
Would coal mining communities potentially back them in their community? That's the other big equation. People say who wants one, which electorate wants one?
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. We need to see the prohibition lifted. That allows the discussion to occur, and then communities can come forward with their interest in nuclear energy.
Right, but that would make sense in terms of the grid, wouldn't it? And maybe it's more appealing because jobs might be exiting those communities with the coal mines?
Well, these are not very big plants, small modular reactors. They're no bigger than a football field in terms of their entire span. So it makes sense for what is already in place. Coal-fired power plants are an ideal place to put a nuclear facility because you can use that existing infrastructure.
Tanya Constable, the debate rages on. We'll see where it goes. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.